Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Vertical Stars Podcast fourth season. My loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. Enjoy this amazing interview because Van Jensen boards the mothership to talk Godzilla heist from IDW Publishing. Now, come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Jensen. Thank you for coming to Vertical Stars Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Very glad to be here.
Totally my pleasure. So, I always start off with a question of inspiration. So, what inspired your love for comics and who your earliest influences?
So I grew up in this tiny little town. It was about 300 people in Nebraska, and so I had very limited access to comics. So our grocery store had like basically like Spider-Man, X-Men, and GI Joe, and so the Larry Hama GI Joe run was like the peak of my childhood comics reading, and like the silent interlude issue, I really think was something that got me started, writing and drawing my own little comics. And but yeah, I had no exposure to, indie comics at all until like college.
So I think it's really interesting because, as everyone knows, probably who's watching this, G.I. Joe it was a licensed comic book based on a cartoon property. Which were you watching the cartoon as you were reading at the same time period?
I never saw the cartoon. Like we were so, I mean, we had this tiny town, and we were even like out in the country away from the town. So we had one of the big antennas up on our house with like the dial that you had to
Mm.
turn to point it. And we could get ABC, NBC, PBS, and like sometimes CBS.
Yeah.
And so it was real like I just didn't have much access to anything. So I never saw the cartoon. But it was just I don't know. I think those comics and there's the new Kickstarter that they did through Skybound is great, and I got them to share them with my kids, and they're just like genuinely awesome comics that
Mm.
are so character centric, and they're both like fun and over the top, but grounded in this really true perspective of war. And yeah, there's great comics.
And Larry Hama is for anyone who is a great guy. He really is a great guy. So and I do have some of the issues, but I was a watcher of the TV show. So I watched. I read a few of the comic books, but I watched a lot of the cartoons, and they were an important part of my childhood. I mean, there are a few cartoons that always hit and will be legendary, and G.I. Joe is one of those cartoons and comics that are just going to be part of the our generation's life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just all-time great stuff.
Now, it's kind of interesting that you talk about G.I. Joe because once again, it's a licensed property, and as someone who's writing Godzilla, you're writing for another licensed property. Now, were there any takeaways you could get from the comic book from reading back G.I. Joe back then, how to handle licensed property that you could then take away to Godzilla?
Honestly, the biggest thing that I think influences me is so there's a guy named Warren Simons who used to be the head editor at Valiant and worked at Marvel before that. Just a great guy, and he is, to his credit, has gotten out of comics. But he gave me advice once when I was writing for DC, and he said, "Man, the thing is, yeah, it's their characters, but you got to tell your stories."
Mm.
And so that's the key thing, I think, is just coming in with, like I have my own perspective, I have my own ideas, I have my own background, and it needs to be a Van Jensen comic. Just because if I'm not like if I'm trying to write a specific thing to fit into a slot, it's not me, and it's just not going to be that good.
Mm.
So with Godzilla, the IDW team had asked me about doing Godzilla, and I was sort of like, I don't really think I have anything. And then I just had the idea for Godzilla Heist, and was like, wait, like if I was gonna do Godzilla, like this is the one thing I would do. And it's just very much, like a Van Jensen comic that happens to have Godzilla in it, I think.
Well, I think it's interesting because Godzilla has a very long history. I mean, the character's been around since I assume the 40s, because he's out of the atomic age. So I assume he came around either late 40s or early 50s.
Mhm.
There's been many different iterations of what Godzilla is, from the Japanese stuff to the MonsterVerse currently. Um, what did you draw from to develop your understanding of what Godzilla would be in your comic?
Yeah, well, the thing that I wanted to do was really because I'm I cannot say that I'm like a completist, right? I mean, there are a million Godzilla things
Yeah.
out there. And so, but I grew up watching a lot of the original Toho movies and even Godzilla minus one, which I think those movies especially, like there's some of the later stuff where it's just like a big monster on monster fight and it's all about spectacle. But I think the ones that work the most for me are the ones where it's a character drama and Godzilla is like this force of nature who
Mm.
comes into it. And especially the very original Godzilla film, which is an incredible movie and a lot more nuanced and I think weird than people remember. Um, it's a character story. It's a drama that has this larger than life thing. So that was really what I want to do is, tell a character centric story and then bring Godzilla in as and even like Kelsey Ramsey who drew it. So many of the times you see Godzilla, it's like a low angle looking up because we
Mm.
wanted Godzilla to be this like huge looming thing. So that was really the approach. And there were some specific, any license thing, like you're working with the licensor, so we're talking to Toho, and it's like, oh, you want to use that kaiju? Well, it's got to be this exact iteration, or we use Mecha Godzilla. Not to spoil it, but that's the subject of the heist. So it was like, okay, it's got to be this exact Mecha Godzilla, and like this is what the cockpit needs to look like, and stuff like that.
Well, like I said, we're issue 4 was released not too long ago, so that at least those 4 issues are out there at the time of this recording. Mechagodzilla has had different iterations as well. As far also including the MonsterVerse version of him from I believe Godzilla versus Kong. Your version of Mechagodzilla is slightly different as far as where the origins come from. Was that something you had to get a approval for, or was that something like I mean, it's a Godzilla story, but it's not necessarily a MonsterVerse story.
Yeah, no, this is really kind of set in its own little nook, so it's not a part of a bigger universe, and we're not tying in any way. Which is, I mean, I didn't want to. I served my time at DC, right? I kind of been burned out of like making everything fit into the big universe. But yeah, we really like we're running like I would put outlines together and then I run those through the editor and he sends them to Toho and then they give us notes of oh this or that and we um there's I'm blanking on the name of it. There's a Godzilla anime that came out a couple of years ago that's really weird. Um, Man, I should have that on the top of my head, but I don't. But it was just a very like strange riff on Godzilla. And so that was honestly like the biggest inspiration point and probably continuity wise, like
Hmm.
that's the closest thing that we were heading towards. But they were really good about like, no, like you can riff and come up with unique things. And I mean, I think mainly they were like, oh, we're gonna see Godzilla in London? Yes.
Well, the other thing with Godzilla, you always have to take into account, and always seems a bit nebulous, maybe in all iterations of the character for Godzilla himself or itself. I guess it's a he. I think we know
It itself is what I was told.
itself. It is it. Okay, so itself is the idea of intelligence and awareness of Godzilla. The sense that he's a force, it's a force of nature. There's a sense that it does, especially in the Godzilla in the MonsterVerse movies, does seem a little bit more intelligent. Other times it seems more of just an animal, that kind of does its thing, force of nature kind of thing. In your comic book, Godzilla's being manipulated by this character called Jay or Jai. Is it Jay or Jai?
Jai.
Jai.
Yeah.
So when you thought about Godzilla, how aware of he is it of its world? I mean, does it realize it's being manipulated? Does it realize that it's being used? I mean, like, what did you think about in those terms?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great question. And it's something where, and there's even like, there's a rule with Toho, with the licensor, that you can never have Godzilla be truly manipulated.
Okay.
That it's like, and there are points within the story where it's like, they have their plan and they do their best laid thing to make Godzilla do this exact thing, but then it's like, there's always going to be, Godzilla's going to freelance a little bit.
Yeah.
And the way that I thought of it, I always try to think of like characters as like, let me get in their heads. And with Godzilla, I really was thinking of it as essentially like a predator brain,
Yeah.
and not predator like the alien
Right,
predator,
right.
but like you think about like a crocodile or an alligator, they attack people for reasons that it's not like, oh, I don't like people, or like, oh, you're a jerk. It's just like I see a thing that I think is food and I go and get it, or I see a thing that I think is a threat and I attack it. And so that was what I wanted to bring to bear, is this kind of I don't know, a bit of like reptilian instinct to it, to where, but I think it's that, but just elevated a
Hmm.
couple of levels to a greater degree of intellect than you would see from simply something that's simply just, like read react.
So the other the well, while guys is more peripheral, Jai's is basically your protagonist. Um, is he crazy? Uh, there's what? Who on earth thinks they can control Godzilla? That's an insane
Yeah,
proposition to start with.
yeah. So the key kind of thing with him that I wanted to write into him was just like irrational confidence.
Yeah.
Um, he is like an insanely smart person, and there's something that's called the Dunning-Kruger effect,
Hmm.
where if you're really good at one thing, you kind of think that you're great at everything. And I think we have a lot of that among the very smart, successful people in the world.
Yeah.
And so he's got a bit of that where it's like, oh, like and even the very opening of the first issue, he robs this casino, essentially with Godzilla's help, but it's like it's basically luck that he survives.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, really really smart accomplished people often discount the degree that luck plays a role. And so there's that, but then there's also, he has this personal tie to Mechagodzilla where he feels like this is his thing that he's owed. So there's like, layers of family history and trauma that are combining with his massive ego, that he's just like, oh, I got this. No big deal.
Well, but this could come off as spoilers, so but they're up to issue 4, so that most of it's been covered. So if it
Yeah.
is too spoilery, please tell me. But for the most part, his heist, Jai's heist, is an act on some level of revenge for what happened due to with his mother, which in turn was an act of revenge on some level for what happened to his grandpa,
Mhm.
who was killed on not, I mean, when I say kill, I mean it's not like Godzilla picked him up and like said, "Hey,
Right.
screw you, guy, I'm gonna eat you." But
Right.
he died during an attack of Godzilla.
Right.
However, Godzilla is like a nuclear bomb. He can't pinpoint destruction. Everything in his path is gonna get destroyed. Um, he's not clearing out the area before an attack. He can't just announce to everybody, "Hey, I'm going to create a heist in downtown. Get out of the way, Godzilla's coming."
Right.
How is he making amends with the fact that his act of revenge is going to cause the death of a whole lot of collateral individuals around him?
Yeah, and it's honestly, so like this isn't the immediate answer. I'll get to the immediate answer, but one of the hardest things with comic books is just the the page goes by so quickly. Like you have
Hmm.
so little space, especially for dialogue, and so talky stuff is just really hard to get into. And so we get into that in depth in the final issue. And I wish that we had more space to get into it earlier, because it's a great point. But no, he looks at it as like, my mom's goal and now my life's goal is to get Mechagodzilla and kill Godzilla.
Yeah.
That's my purpose. And if I do that, however many people die today, I will save exponentially more in the future. And then once we see that he's really out into it, and it grows bit by bit through the series as he's seeing the actual effects up close and it becomes personal and immediate, that it changes him and
Hmm.
it changes the calculus for him. And so that's kind of the like the big, circle of the story. Is it starts with this act of a Godzilla attack that causes this personal trauma that sets all these people on this journey, and it ends with another Godzilla attack that really changes this third generation now. But yeah, I mean, again, it's the character drama. Like, it's fun to play with this thing of someone who is a bit callous and egocentric, and then becomes, it's a human character who becomes more human really over the course of it.
His act inherently hypocritical, considering once again he's doing this based on the death of his grandfather by Godzilla. Is it hypocritical then to use Godzilla then to cause the damage elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like the ultimate realization, is that, he kind of gets to the point of like, oh, that like this is someone else's grandpa or mom or son or whatever. Like, these are all someone, and it's on me.
Mm.
And that's the point that we get to in the final issue.
And using the analogy again of a nuclear bomb, obviously, like Godzilla comes like a nuclear bomb with massive devastation. But Mechagodzilla is a nuclear bomb as far as once the Americans created the nuke, it opened the door for other countries that you don't want to have the nuke to get the nuke, as it were. Once you get the information out there, the technology is out there, other people are going to get their hands on it. How dangerous of a door is Jai opening by bringing the Mechagodzilla into, or finishing his mother's work and getting Mechagodzilla back into the world?
Yeah, again, I think that his ego through the start of the story, this is a guy that thinks he deserves this. It's his, but he's partnering with people, and they don't know his mission. So that's the double cross through the story, is like he has his own thing, and he's tricking the this crew that he's working with, and the crew, like, they want to take this thing and create their own country and dominate the world. Like,
Yeah.
they don't care about Godzilla. They're just like, yeah, we'll just like kill everyone that we want to and have as much money as we want and do whatever we want. And so even just, you think about like Jai is taking the risk that he fails and they succeed.
Yeah.
Because that's an entirely like that's like the most likely scenario, right? And so no, like he's going to really extreme lengths to try to make this thing happen. But I think again, it's like he's so irrationally confident. He's just like, oh yeah, like I'll defeat Godzilla, like wrangle Godzilla, kill or defeat all of these like experienced military types. Like, sure, no big deal.
I mean, it's such a fascinating concept because the possibilities are so vast, especially, and when you think again about beating Godzilla. Let's say a miracle happens, he's able to beat Godzilla, which even a big Godzilla, as we know from history of movies, isn't necessarily going to be equal to what Godzilla is. But if
Yeah.
he does defeat Godzilla, does he have a next step in his head of what do you do now with the Mecha Godzilla that is there? He can't live in the Mecha Godzilla, obviously.
Right.
What's his, does he have a plan of what to do next if this were to be successful?
I think that he's been so fixated on this one goal that it has like pushed out all other thoughts. And
Yeah.
so which is why he's so, I mean, he's honestly like pretty one-dimensional. Like I said, like he's not all that human at the start of the story, because he is like, he's kind of like just like turned blinders
Hmm.
on to life and to the outside world. Like, I think he's the kind of guy that like does not really have friends, doesn't have a girlfriend, like doesn't, just it doesn't have much. And he's like, I need to get really smart, I need to get rich, and I need to pull this thing off. And like, I need to be smart and rich to do that. And that's been it for him.
For Bender, what does victory look like to him?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bender is someone who, he basically inherited Jai's mom's project, the Mechagodzilla,
Hmm.
because the British military seized it from her. And he's just been this guy who's like a kind of a lab rat, who's like, hey, just like take this genius thing and finish it. Like, you're not a genius to make enough to make this, but like you can take it from 90% to 100% and get it done. And I think he's just kind of a resentful guy who is like literally in the, like, not even the basement, but like the basement below the basement
Right.
for all of his life, working on this secret thing, not really appreciated. And then it's like, well, what what if I just took it? So and that's not to say that he's like you never want a character to be like, like twirling their mustache, just like I'm just evil. I think that he's someone who feels deeply unappreciated and sort of like trod down by the machine of the government, and it's just like, like I could finish this thing and then they're just going to take it away from me and my life is no better, or I could take my fate into my own hands.
So you look at Bender and his goal for Mechagodzilla, you look at Jai and his goal for Mechagodzilla, and then you look at the creator, Jai's mother and Mechagodzilla. How vast is the difference between the goals of these three characters as far as I mean, ultimately, you're looking at a weapon destruction that they created for destructive purposes, and it doesn't seem like they necessarily have a what's next after the original goal is done. So, how wise was what the mother started with this?
Yeah, and I think I don't think there was much wisdom anywhere along the line. I think it's something that I always like to explore in the books that I write is just like cycles of violence and cycles of trauma.
Mhm.
I wrote a graphic novel called Two Dead that's based on true crime that came from my crime reporting days, and that book is probably like the most about that specific thing, but it's just something that, and you see this in the world. This happens all the time. I mean, it's like we've got a war going on in the Middle East right
Right,
now, and my kids were like why are they fighting? I was like, they've been fighting for how many thousands of years?
right.
Like that's I don't know because it just like it, something happened a long time ago and no one could let it go, right? So I think that that's really where we're at is this is a story where it's just like generation after generation of just rage, a little bit of greed, a little bit of selfishness. But the thing that you find with that is, most times when people actually achieve the thing that they've always wanted to achieve, it's like it doesn't give you the satisfaction
Mhm.
that you thought it was. It's there's like that just it leads to more crappy stuff happening. There's no catharsis after you kill the bad guy.
Mm. And the other thing with Godzilla as well is that depending on the true nature of the world universe you're creating, um, most iterations of Godzilla suggest that he's not the only Titan that exists.
Right.
And I don't know if your universe has the other Titan, but I assume it does. I mean,
Yeah.
just conceptually.
Yeah.
Um, if they were successful, I mean, would the world be better without Godzilla? Obviously, he kills millions, but at the same time, he does stop the things that probably would kill billions.
Right. Right. I mean, again, that's a perfect illustration of the short-sightedness of it all. Of clearly, this is a thing that is part of nature that exists, that has existed for a really long time and serves a purpose. So, yeah, maybe you could remove it from the ecosystem, but yeah, what then? And that's just like the human story all over, right? Like we just want to do the thing that we're motivated to do,
Mm.
and like, oh wait, that actually has terrible consequences. Oh, who could have seen that happening?
I mean, it's such an interesting story, and when you were conceiving it, like how much of it did you view it as a true heist story, and how much did you think this is was it a Keiju? I guess they go under now the term Keiju
Yeah.
story. And was there what? Because it feels like around issue three, the heist story starts stopping, and we start moving into the other thing, or is there gonna be more circling back to the heist aspect of the story?
I mean, I really wanted to. Well, and part of it, is like if it's a Godzilla book and we're stealing Mechagodzilla, like there's going to be a big fight between Godzilla and Mechagodzilla. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, like
it
that's
should
just
be, right?
yeah, that's just gonna happen. I always wanted to do it where it's a heist story pretty much all the way through, and then at the just like the final act of it is it turns into a kaiju story.
Mm,
But it's really and usually most heist stories is like you have a big final set piece. Maybe it's an escape. Maybe it's you have to fight your way out. But there's almost always that like that big actiony ending. And so I just looked at it as like our big actiony ending just happens to be like kaiju battle royale.
And the other thing too that seems to be true with Godzilla, and I may be wrong because I don't have not seen every movie, but I feel like I'm not. I don't know. You'll tell me. Is for the most part, Godzilla never loses. How does this set up the stakes for the end where you can't? I mean, your main character job. At the same time, you have a character like Godzilla who, for the most part, in his history, doesn't really lose.
Yeah.
I mean, so like what? I guess I can't give away an ending, but like, what kind of direction are we headed in with this battle then?
Yeah, well, it's not a clean ending for anyone. I'll put it that way. You know, I don't like I think if Jai were to come away from it where it's just like, hey, I got Mecha Godzilla and I knocked Godzilla out and like now I'm awesome, you know, there's no satisfaction in that.
Yeah,
So, you know, what I really wanted to bring him to a point of kind of, you know, one, like realizing that he was wrong just conceptually,
yeah,
sort of like the whole conceit of this was just ill-informed. And two, that like, you know, he has to go from a place of selfishness to a place of concern and care for humanity. And so it you know it's both like he succeeds and he fails. Is the best way to put it. And you know, Godzilla Godzilla does a lot of damage. You know, it's Kelsey, the last issue, she did an amazing job with it, and it is like big and brutal. And I kind of wanted to treat it where it's almost like so this is kind of a weird callback, but the Muhammad Ali biopic that Will Smith did,
oh, okay,
um, the way that that was directed, the camera a lot of times in the fighting is like pushed way in, and so you're just like really close on the action, and you're really, you know, you're really tight, and you're really seeing it, these like body blows. And I kind of wanted that to be the feel of it, so that you know, it is this huge epic thing, and they are massive, and you do see that, but at the same time, they're roughly equally sized, and they're just kind of tearing the shit out of each other.
that's I mean,
Um,
like, it sounds like such an awesome comic book. How many issues is up to issue 4 now? How many issues is it going for?
just five.
Oh, no, so we're closing in on the end of this.
Yeah, yeah, it's just
Oh
about
wow,
done.
okay, that's awesome. But like I said, it's such an interesting story, and I really enjoyed the concept of it is ingenious. I really enjoyed what you did with it.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. So what's next for you?
I am busy. So I wrote a novel called Godfall that came out. It originally came out with a small press like a year and a half ago, and subsequently it became the subject of a very big Hollywood bidding war. And it's now being adapted to TV by Imagine Entertainment and Amazon, and Ron Howard is directing it.
Nice, nice,
Which
well
is
done.
pretty wild. So
Yeah,
I'm an executive producer on that. And then I sold another TV project that I am executive producer and showrunner on. So I'm, you know, I thankfully have a great mentor who's teaching me how to be a showrunner. And so that'll be coming up in a bit. And there's actually kind of weirdly, it was a comic book concept, but I sold it for TV first, and now I'm also doing it as a comic. So it's going to be me and Robbie Rodriguez at Image for that book,
very
and then
cool.
I'll be a little bit off. And then I'm trying to think. I just wrote a feature script, and then my novel Godfall, which it's like a sci-fi murder mystery. So it's a giant alien, like a Galactus-sized thing, falls out of the sky and lands next to this small Nebraska town. Of course, I had to pick a small Nebraska town.
Yeah.
And then it's just dead. So it's like this giant alien corpse with a giant blade stuck through it that's just lying there. And then the whole outside world descends on this town. So it's about the sheriff of this town who, you know, is like just wanted to be Andy Griffith, and then all of a sudden has to deal with all this insanity
Mhm.
that comes to town. So that has subsequently gotten picked up by Grand Central, which is one of the big, you know, big five publishers. And so a new hardcover edition is coming in January, and then there will be two sequels, one a year for the next couple of years. So there's a couple other things, but I mean, I'm kind of in a great place, like very slammed with work and have just like really great, exciting stuff that I'm getting to work on.
That's awesome. Like I say, come back to talk about Godfall. Come back to talk about whatever you want to talk about. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And I said I would love to talk about, especially well when you're ready. Once you said January, I guess for Godfall the.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll keep you posted.
All right, very cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right, have a good night, sir.
You too.